Good evening, music lovers. What I want to know is, listen, hold it. Are you ready? I want to tell you something. We are here tonight because you and I have great tastes.
The next person we'd like to bring to your attention is probably the quietest man in rock and roll.
Hey, welcome back to the Ear Mob Podcast. I'm your host, Chaz Stumbo. And again, I am joined by my dear friend, Jeff Ocheltree, for part 2 of this madness. Jeff, how you doing today?
Good, Chaz. Good. Thank you. How
Good.
about you?
I'm good. You know, just again with the leg, but beyond that, I think we'll be okay here in a couple of weeks, hopefully. So, Jeff, last time we got into a bit of trouble, man. We started talking about the pandemic and we kind of got sidetracked a little bit, but I think it actually went well because we got into things that you wouldn't expect to hear from a music podcast or just, you know, in general, just two friends chatting it up and, you know, dropping the wisdom on their philosophies on the pandemic and how everybody's dealing with that and that. So, what do you think we did pretty good last time?
I do, and the fact that my kids liked it, they have good taste, so I'll take that as it's good. It's a good thing.
Beautiful.
I mean, my voice sounds like I was on helium, but I really wasn't.
I think it sounds fine. I always have trouble going back and listening to myself, so. Yeah, it's just being an overcritical thing, I guess. So
It is.
So today what I wanted to get into is the stuff we meant to get into last time, and we dived into it a little bit. We got, you know, where you came from, working with Snail, and then moving to New York with Billy Cobham, and you mentioned that during that time in New York, you were heading over to a drum shop and getting a ton of knowledge from a person. I don't remember. My apologies. I don't remember who that person was. Can you go into that again?
Al Duffy, who invented the chain pedal at Frank Appolito's shop called Professional Percussion on 8th Avenue, I guess. And I would hang out there, and I would, initially go there to pick up stuff for Billy. Like his sticks were sent from upstate New York down to that shop. I would check them out, and because in those days you got on a flat surface like the counter, which is usually glass, and you'd roll them. Oh, we got to roll those sticks, make sure they're all straight. And I never saw hardly any sticks that were not perfect. They were just well-made, beautiful sticks. But anyway, I spent a lot of time there, and that's where I got to befriend Al Duffy. And he was just really knowledgeable, and he had a lot of great ideas what to do with edges on drums. The interiors, like we were learning how to use polyurethane or, some kind of clear coat on the inside. And what that did for a lot of drums is it gave them a little bit more volume. And other tricks. And he had a shop in Brooklyn. And so sometimes when I was off for a week or so with Billy, he would invite me over to the shop. Man, I was learning all kinds of stuff over there. I thought I knew a lot, but he really educated me. And I'm very grateful for that. And,
well, you know that
I think what's different today is that I'm not saying there aren't mentors. And I'm not going to try to venture. I won't venture to say that there aren't mentors in all kinds of things. I'm sure there are mentors. But back then, for what we were doing, late 60s, early 70s, there wasn't a lot of people that you could learn from because it was a relatively new world. Roading, teching for a great musician. They came from a world of where they set up their own stuff, they did all their own things. There wasn't these specialized human beings working for bands. That was like the guy that set up the drums also set up the PA or something. I mean, there was always, situations where, well, who's taking care of the drums? Well, the same guy that's taking care of the monitors. What? And so for me, it was so cool that to be able to develop your own niche and your own So Al Duffy really helped me a lot. He got me to see all the dimensions of what my work was going to be. And yeah, wonderful situation.
So you guys were basically just kind of blazing the trail. You're basically designing and building that position for what it would become later on through the 70s and 80s, 90s, up into what it is now.
True, very true. And the thing about what I thought was funny for the longest time, I don't know if that's the right word, not funny, but what I thought was interesting for the longest time, we're going to redo the edges on those drums. And I'd say, well, they sure sounded good to me. Well, why are you going to? Because there was this thing where everybody was redoing edges. Oh, they got to be this. They got to be that. Oh, they got to change that. And I remember John Molo had a really cool, large Gretsch kit, and he was going to have them repainted. I think Bill Dittemore did it, and God, they were really cool drums. And I took them apart for John, and I also kind of prepped them a little bit, sanded them, things like that. And I remember we had a discussion, John and I. John Molo is a phenomenal drummer. Anyway, we were working in his house in his living room, and I remember because his drum room was too small, and we had drums everywhere. And he said, "What do you think I should do with the edges?" I said, "I wouldn't touch these edges. These are Gretsch drums. There's no point in touching them." And so I said, "Make sure Bill doesn't do anything to the edges." And he did. He went ahead and did it anyway. And it changed the whole demeanor of the kit. The Gretsch drums, even the ones that had kind of rounded edges, they still sounded great by many drummers. So that was a kind of a letdown because there was this phenomena where everybody had to change some things, but mostly it was the edges. No, I understood why they did it on some drums. Some drums, the edges look like they used a carving knife for a turkey. You know, did you use a router on that? No, I just used my Boy Scout knife. Well, it looks like it. Did you sand it? No, I didn't have any sandpaper. So that transcended into guys learning how to use a router table and getting good at it. And I understood why they did it for some drums, but it just was like everything you touch. Why? Why are you doing that? And the paint job that Bill's an amazing painter, and he did this amazing green finish on the drums. So here's these beautiful Gretsch drums. They're pristine condition, and they're painted beautifully by Bill, but he changed the edges. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Bill's work on his own drums, and he's a great craftsman, but don't touch the edges on old Gretsch drums, especially round beds and stuff like that. Leave those alone. You know?
Well, it's funny you mentioned the edges because that's such a big deal now with a lot of companies. They'll come out with a new line of drums and they'll advertise that the edges are rounded off or they're more to a point, so there's less contact with the head, and it allows this and allows that. And that's a lot of stuff that maybe information that just your general drummers don't know about, what those edges do to affect the sound of the drums. And what's going on there?
Well, okay, before I answer that question, because that's a really good question, I have a good answer. But before I do that, I want to say, by the way, at this shop, it was a remarkable place. Lenny Castro worked behind the counter for a while. And I remember one day he said, "Yeah, pretty soon I won't be doing this. I'll be playing congas for somebody heavy." And I said, "Oh, okay, that's great." And before you know it, he's in LA and he's doing amazing things. And now he's one of the most brilliant percussionists. Lenny Castro, yes. Let's see. My answer to that is, I think when you're like, I only deal with bronze and steel. I don't do anything with wood anymore. I got really bored. Everybody copies everybody. Everybody was doing the same thing. One guy drops out of high school to become a drum builder. Maybe he should have stayed in school. I guess what I'm saying is that it was an just a flooding of people doing things, especially with edges. I think, especially when you're dealing with density of materials, I think you really have to understand the materials you're using to make drums. If you're not making your own shells and you're just getting them from, well, the old days, Keller and Jasper and all that. Well, you didn't make those shells. And so, well, I mean, I always loved John Good when he would show you some shells, and man, he'd hold that drum and hit it with the palm or his fist, and oh man, I heard some amazing shells over there at DW and Oxnard when John would do that. So I guess what it was is an overflooding of the market, people doing this, people doing that, especially with edges. You know what? I do a 45 with a 20 thousandths plan on bronze and steel, and that's really sharp. And the reason why is because it's a dense material. And yeah, there's resonance and all that, but you got to know what it's going to do. And so you experiment with edges. Well, people never did that. They would just take the shell and cut a certain edge, and this is what everybody's doing. I'm going to do it too. And I think there's the downfall for that was it becomes another homogenation. That's not how you say that word, but hold on, let me get my speech therapist. Anyway, I think what happens is you get mediocrity. And I remember my mom used to say, you know, when you start, how did she express that? Mediocrity breeds contempt. You get way too many people doing the same thing and not really paying attention to the fundamentals, which is, okay, what kind of a shell are you working on here? What's its purpose? Is it a snare drum? Is it a tom? What do you know about the materials? How did they make this shell? Have you put edges and done things with other shells like it so you understand what the degree is of the angle of the edge you put on, or the land, which is the very top of the edge? That's what they call the land. And do you understand? If you have a wide land, what will that do to this particular material? If you have a narrower land, what does that do to this particular material? So I don't think it's a good idea. We have way too many drum makers, and they're doing a lot of mediocre stuff. And there lies a problem. If you really want to become good at something, you need to either have a mentor, or if you're going to be self-taught, you need to go around and investigate and research and stop copying. Way too many copycats. Stop doing that. Do what most people did in the old days. How do I learn how to do this? Well, watch somebody who's really good at it do it. When there isn't somebody in your town, or you can't get near someone to learn how to do this in a really good way and understand it better. So that's what I loved about Al Duffy, is he showed me, don't just put an edge on something. In fact, I think meddling was something that's already proven itself in the studio and live, is kind of a no-no. And, you know, the thing is, that's the other thing about drum building. When you drum build, you got to have a lot of experience. You can't just do what everybody else is doing. How much experience do you have working live? How much experience do you have in the studio? I have had some real amazing situations in the studio. I've had some other things that caused me a lot of anxiety. Like, why can I not get this the way I want to hear it? And well, where are you situated in the room? What kind of mic are they using? What kind of head are you using on the drum? What kind of drum is this? What is it supposed to do? What is it that you're wanting it to do? So if you don't learn skills on how to deal with those challenges, you're never going to get to the next level when it comes to drum building and things like that. Yeah.
Well, you know, I've had experiences before where you have a really nice drum kit where all of the drums sound good except for one. And it's the same material, same everything, same heads, top and bottom. Usually I find that it's a 14-inch floor tom. I have an affinity for 14-inch floor toms. They drive me absolutely insane. I don't know why a 14-inch floor tom was ever brought into play on anything. But that's just
no, I can't believe you're saying that.
Well, that's just my personal opinion because prime example, I used to play on a Tama kit, and it was a nice Babinga kit, kind of darker sounding, not really my thing, but it was a nice kit. And every single drum, the 8, 10, 12, 16, and the kick drum always sounded amazing. That 14-inch floor tom was my nemesis. I couldn't do anything to get that 14-inch floor tom to sound good. And I know that sometimes you can run into something like that on kits, but that 14 drove me nuts.
Absolutely. Now Tama's a very good company. They build great drums. But here's a question for you. Was the wall thickness of that 14 the same as the other drums that have a wider diameter?
Well, see, it wasn't my kit, so I don't know the answer to that. All I can say is...
I'll bet you $100 right now it was the same. Now, there lies an understanding. I don't know how many 14-inch floor toms made by Tama out of Babinga. Babinga is a dense material. It's a dense wood. It used to be only come from Europe, now in Africa or wherever. Now it comes from North America as well. I love Babinga, especially Sonar Babinga. Oh, they're the best. But let me tell you something. Not to say anything disparaging about Tama, but when you take a narrower diameter shell and make it the same way as all the wider diameter shells, well, there could be a problem there, especially with Babinga. That's a dense material. You got to open that drum up, which means you need to have a narrower wall. That's my opinion. Now, have I ever changed the wall on a drum? No, you can't do that. Once the drum comes off the lathe, or once the drums is very difficult to change the ID, the inside diameter. Or you don't want to change the outside diameter because now you can't put the lugs on and everything line up right. But you can change how much material's on the inside. But it's really hard to do that once the drum's already been made. So I'm not saying Tama didn't think of this, but you're not the first person to tell me that. And I have worked with a lot of Babinga kits. Sonar. I have not worked with Tama Babinga kits, but I have seen them, and I have seen their toms. They're good craftsmen, Tama. But you got to remember something about China, Korea, Japan. They didn't make drums in their country. Their culture didn't do that. What they did was they came over here and they checked out what we were already doing. And in some instances, they improved upon it really well. Sonar is one of the oldest drum companies in the world. They didn't need anybody telling them how to do something. They make great drums. They're 14s, they're 16s, they're 15s, they're 18s, they're 20s. I mean, every drum they make out of Babinga is amazing. And my friend Charlie Fenning, who's an amazing drummer in L.A., he's got a Sonar Babinga kit, and there's all the sizes. Danny, Kerry, 10, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 16, 18, 20. I mean, there's no problem with the way those drums sound. Also, what kind of heads did you have on that 14-inch, 16, and all the other drums? What heads did you have on there? Do you remember?
I do, and because it was a house kit, it wasn't my choice to put on the heads that I wanted to put on.
That's not what I'm asking.
But I do remember. Yeah, they were the Evans 2-ply, so it would have been
G2.
Yeah, the G2s. A bit too. I'm always been a Remo guy, and for some reason I just love. I've never had a problem with Remo heads ever. It's just one of those things where if it's not broke, why fix it type of thing. And Evans, I've switched to Evans a few different times and always end up going right back to Remo. So, I do have a bias there. But that 14 was just so darn difficult. It always had a weird frequency to it. And I just couldn't get rid of this frequency.
The question, though, Chaz, you just answered your own question because it had a 2-ply head on there. And maybe that doesn't work out for a 14-inch Tama Babinga drum. I don't know. I guess it's a house kit, and did the house guy who mixes, did he ever say anything? I mean, I don't. It's an interesting thing. What the other thing is the perception we all have. A lot of us who have good ears, we want to hear a certain pitch. We want to hear a certain thing in the drum. I've heard some amazing 14-inch floor toms. Cindy's got some that are just amazing. And I've heard other guys, Steve, all kinds of people with Gretsch stuff, the old stuff. They have 14s that sound amazing. I love 14s, especially if you've got bigger floor toms beside them. But I understand what you're saying. That's frustrating. I mean, I was doing the Modern Drummer Festival at Danny Carey, and I could not get his 10-inch tom with Evans heads on it. Sonar, I could not get the thing to sound right. I was starting to doubt my ability, because here I am. I'm spending so much time trying to get this one drum, and a guy from Evans came over, and I can't remember his name now. He said, "Do you mind me trying something out?" I said, "Please do." And he did, and he had that thing sounding great. I hadn't worked with enough Evans heads with any drums. There is a little difference. Tune them way up, then tune them down, then tune them back up. Maybe that's one way. It's just, if the head's been on there a long time, does it have anything going, that we should know about? I mean, there's tricks. There's tricks, but also your ears can play tricks. And where are the drums positioned? And it's like all these things, sometimes you just have to say, this isn't happening. I'm just going to play my ass off and forget about it. And most of the time, other than yourself, nobody out there is going to say anything. Well, I don't know. Your 14 didn't sound as good as the other drums. Man, if a guy says that, really? You heard that? Well, you should be in the roster of the great drum techs and drummers. Yeah, I doubt very much that night, especially if you're playing your ass off like you do, they would have heard the difference. But you heard it, and that can be very annoying. It's hard to let go of that. You want your drums to sound the way you want them to sound. See, when I started off in this business, there wasn't a bunch of drummers saying to me, "Hey, man, I want my kit to sound like this, and I want those toms to have this pitch and that pitch." So the language used was a little different. It said, "We want to have our own sound. I play drums. I want my own sound. Can you give me a reference, though, what you like?" Well, I love Simon Kirk with Bad Company. I love those toms. Okay, Ludwig drum. What are you playing? Whatever. If they're not playing Ludwig, okay, do you know what heads he uses? Do you play like him? There's all these things, but the best thing you can do, it's funny, these little tricks. And it's just not being afraid to try just little things and then move on. Because we used to see these engineers in the studio spending hours on getting drum sounds. And a famous producer engineer, what's his name, English guy, he says anybody that's got a DVD out, and he said anybody that spends more than a half an hour on drums shouldn't be in the business. And that's what I learned how to do. Is you gotta get this happening now. You go in earlier than anybody else. You set up. You get the drum. You want the drummer wants certain heads put on it. Fine, that's what you do if they're not already on there. And you get those drums tweaked. Nobody wants to sit around and wait for you because you're cutting in on their time. And the engineer, if he doesn't get it, he doesn't know what to do with that console, and he doesn't know where to put those mics. Well, then that's not the place for you. If you've been doing it a long time and you know what you want to hear, then this should be a no-brainer. Get it done. Now, if there's a problem drum, get rid of it. Do something else with it until you have the proper time. But if you're spending a lot of time on just one drum and it's easy to do because we want to be perfectionists in this. And if we have good ears, we want our ears to be pleased. And we can't please our ears if there's something nagging at us. Like I had John Wackerman and I had this session at the Palm Studio in Vegas. And I think it was for the bass player for the Killers. And there was one floor tom, I don't think it was a 14, it was a 16 DW. And I could not get the bottom head to stop going boom. And it really ticked me off. And I wasn't going to tape it up. I wasn't going to change the way the fundamental drums work. The air goes from the top to the bottom. What can you do? Tune it differently. So I started, turned the drum upside down and pretended the bottom was the top and just got the bottom sounding really good. And yeah, it took some more time, but everybody agreed. Jeff, can you fix that? Yes, I can. I think I love being in the 60s and 70s and some of the 80s when it came to studios, because what you did was you gained trust by the producer or engineer, and they would say, Jeff, can you make that one drum? Do you hear that one thing? And well, the snare drum's got a ring. Why would you want to take that out? You won't hear that in the music. But it was mostly a tom or floor tom, sometimes a bass drum. And you had to understand the language. Jeff, I want this to sound differently. Well, what do you want? And the producer usually knew what they were talking about. They had good ears. And so your job, the way you learn how to do things well, is how quickly it takes you to do them. If you don't get the lingo and your ears don't hear what he's talking about, you're screwed. So I think that's why I'm glad I grew up in the eras I grew up in and learned from some of the greatest. Working with Ken Scott and just amazing guys, and just they had the lingo down. Jeff, can you make that? Can you do something with the number 3 floor tom? Yes, well, that's 18. Yes, I can. Okay, what is it you want? I would like it to be less this, or I would like it to be more that. And you better understand the words and get your ass out there and get it done now. They don't want to hear, I don't know how to get this, you know. I put a roll of gaffer's tape on it, and it still sounds crappy. And, well, I bet it does. Or there's all the, I remember the LA thing. It was you take a little piece of gaffers and you kind of fold it. And some guys are very artistic about it. And the placement of those little folded up pieces of, usually on the snare drum. But then now we're going to do it on the tom. They want a tone. They want to hear drum tone. But their ears said, can it be a little deader or a little less tone? I like guys like Steve and Billy and other guys where they want tone. Don't cut that tone off. Don't let me play the drum. Let me play it with the music. And it's amazing how much difference that makes. Drum techs aren't doing the session, aren't doing the live gig. The drum techs are preparing the drums to be pleasing for the drummer. I don't want to annoy the drummer. I don't want him in the back of his mind being, bummed out. That needs to be dealt with.
That affects sitting on my side, the drum tone. When you're sitting behind the kit and you see that little red light come on, if you're not satisfied with how the drums sound and how they feel to you when you're playing, you might as well throw that take away, because it's not going to feel good because you don't feel good about it. And I had an experience where that was for a band that I was in at the time. It was a major label record coming out, and I was recording some drum tracks for it. And the snare drum that we were using was the same exact snare drum that Dave Grohl used on the Nirvana Nevermind record. It's a Tama, I think it's a 6 by 14, 6.5 by 14. I don't think it's an 8 by 14. It's a Bell Brass snare drum. So I'm looking at the snare drum. I'm like, oh man, this thing's going to sound so good. And the producer he came out and tuned it, and I hit it, and it didn't feel good to me at all. I'm like, how? And I said to him, how am I supposed to play this drum when it doesn't feel good? There's no response. There's no love coming back to me,
That's
and
really good
he's
question.
like, but this is the sound I'm going for. I'm like, oh man, well, you rented this expensive drum from Drum Doctors, to do this session when you could have just gotten a $200 snare drum and got the same result, because the head's so loose, and the drum sounds so tubby that you're not getting any of the drum. And it bummed me out. Everything else sounded fantastic, but I was going through a snare head every third take. They were coming out and changing it because it was just so loose, it was getting dimpled. And I'm not a terribly hard hitter. I mean, as you get older, you realize, man, if you wake up the next day after a gig and you're hurting, you played too hard. You know, so I learned a long time ago, you don't have to hit the drums hard to get good tonality out of them. And it was a struggle on that. And I had somebody give me some words of advice one time. They said, look, when you're going into the studio to record, get the drums sounding the way you like them and how they feel good to you. And then it's the engineer's job to make the recording sound good, not yours. You get the drums to where they're comfortable for you.
Exactly. The engineer comes out and hears the drums before he starts miking them. Not the other way around. Okay, so you mic the drums. I wasn't finished setting them up, and I hadn't finished tuning them. I need to tune them for the room. Not every spot in a room is going to be like where you last had the drum set up. So most spots, like that place in the Palms, that studio has amazing room for drums. It's just amazing. So, and there's a certain spot they sound the best in. So that's a good point. He comes out there and detunes the drum, doesn't even hear you playing. It doesn't even hear what the drum sounds like where you have them set up. To me, that's kind of ignorant because unless the guy spent most of his life not being a good producer but being a good drum tech, the roles need to be reversed, I guess. Something's not going on there right. Now, there are very opinionated producers. Like I did Stone Sour's album, the band offshoot of what's a band, Slipknot. And Corey Taylor, the singer, amazing singer.
And a hell of a nice guy, too.
He is a very nice guy. And his wife's from Las Vegas, and that's why they spent a lot of time there. But what's his name? Ray, the drummer. Oh, my God, the guy's an amazing player.
Is it Ray Mayorga? Is that who it is? Ray Mayorga?
Yes. Oh, I love that guy. Ray Mayorga. I'm sorry I didn't say his last name. Sorry about that. But he asked me if I would come to Des Moines and do the album, and I was so honored. And Charlie Lillywhite, is that his name? The producer.
Is it? Well, I know there's Steve Lillywhite, who did a lot of work with like U2 and that type of thing, but I'm not familiar with the Charlie Lillywhite. He may be real. Steve. Okay.
No, I think I blocked out his first name. He did Tool's album Lateralus, I think, and we got along. I mean, I had the drums sounding amazing, and you know what? Ray liked them. But if the pitch of the snare just changed a tiny bit, run out there and get that back to where it was. I said, yeah, but he hasn't finished the tune. Well, it doesn't matter. I can hear it. Okay, so can I hear the drum all the way through a tune? I never did. I never got to hear. There were so many times I had to run out there. Not on all tunes, but on some of them. And I wasn't a drum tech anymore. It was this mechanical thing. There's a pitch we want it to be kept at, and it's dropping. And yeah, I guess if you got a lot of good tone ears, you'll hear that. But to hear it in the middle of a tune, that means you're not listening to anything else. And here's a guy who's a brilliant producer, done great albums, but are you listening to the rest of the tune? And I got the feeling this was, if I was a paranoid individual, I would have said they're doing this on purpose to upset us. I got the feeling it was like, well, let's challenge this guy's skills. That may be very egotistical of me to say that, but I don't really give a crap. Most of the album was fun to work on, but there was parts of it that were a bummer because of this constant monkeying around with the snare drum. I just don't get the monkeying. Let's hear the song, the drums through the whole tune. The energy is great. The drummer's playing really fantastic, and now you're stopping in the middle of this thing, and you're having me run out there, and it got to the point where it was hard to really figure out what it was that they were hearing. I was starting to doubt my ears. And that's funny because my DVD's called Trust Your Ears, and I was starting to distrust my ears. And because I was overdoing it, in my opinion, I was getting burnt out. Instead of, I am very inspired by good music and good musicians. Very inspired. It makes you think and listen differently. It's not like you're sitting there, oh, I sure hope the drums sound good forever. Now I'm hearing the drums in the music. And if it's good music with great players, a good tune, man, it's just so inspiring, especially if you've done your work and done it well. I just felt like I was being, this may be way too personal, but it felt like there was a little bit of sabotaging going on. Is sabotaging a word? Sabotage. I felt like that was happening. So I'll get off that, but I was going to say, you knew what you wanted. And what would have happened if you had said, excuse me, Mr. Producer, could I finish doing what I'm doing with the snare drum? And could I familiarize myself really quick with the kit? It wasn't your kit, right?
No. It was the kit was an actual vintage Gretsch kit that is owned by Josh Freese. So they were using that in the studio, right. and that kit was amazing. I mean, it's just there's something about the older wood as it dries out and it cures. It sounded the toms and the kick drum sounded amazing. Like that was like the sound. It just sounded so good. And the snare drum, by all rights, should have sounded amazing to me, but it just wasn't in my comfort zone as far as tuning. And I'm not the producer. I'm not the engineer. I don't know my way around what he was looking for. When I changed the head, I said, let me change the head. I changed the head. And it was a Remo coated Ambassador, standard go-to single ply. I changed it and I brought the drum up a little bit to where it was comfortable for me to play. And usually there's a fine line there. If it's too tight, then it's not comfortable for me to play. If it's too loose, I don't get the response. I call it the love. I don't get the love back from the drum because I can't do my little ghost strokes and that type of thing. They're just not as responsive as I like it. And it was too high. The only thing that bums me out on that is, again, when I was recording the tracks, they didn't really call for a lot of ghost strokes and stuff like that. It wasn't, super drum intensive drum tracks. They were pretty straightforward. But because it didn't feel good to me, I feel that it kind of affected what I played a little bit. And I mean, a lot of times now, this was 15 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. But a lot of times now, they'll just go back in and fly a sample over it anyways. So,
that's very true.
I don't know.
I never thought about that with the Stone Sour thing. Maybe they're going to quantize or whatever those words are.
Quantize is making it perfect time-wise. Locking it into a grid.
I'm sorry. Boy, I didn't know what I was talking about. Well, thank you for correcting me.
No.
You're right. They add stuff to it. Well, what happened to the tone? This room has got great tone. The drums have great tone in the room, and what's going on? Yeah, that must be. I know those drums you're talking about of Josh. I love Josh. He's one of my favorite drummers. I just don't get why. Who was the artist?
Well, I don't want to get into it too much because I don't want people. I mean, there's only been a few. Let me put it to you this way: there's only one major label record that I've ever played on, like major label record that I ever played on. And if anybody's listening to this who knows me, can go back and figure it out, and they're going to figure out who the producer is because he's done a lot of stuff, especially back that time. And he was. I will go on record as saying he was a really nice guy, like really cool. Had a lot of patience. They were looking for a certain sound, and long story short, I had been in the band for a short time, was out of the band for about a year, got called back in to record the tracks that I had originally done the demos for. And then, with this, I'm looking at this snare drum and I'm like, this is like the holy grail of snare drums. This is like the snare drum. This thing's going to be great to play. And it just didn't feel good. And for me, when I'm playing, like my particular snare drums, they're all pitched up a little bit higher, like the head's a little bit tighter, but they're not cranked super duper tight. I can't do that. That's too tight. When the drum starts to choke out, that's too much. Even on like an 8x14, the depth of the drum's going to give me a little bit of that tubby sound. That's why I love 8x14 so much, because I can bring the head up a little bit on it and still get that body of the drum. And that particular bell brass, I'm like, oh, this is bell brass. This thing's going to be killer. And it just, where the head was tensioned at, just kind of took the wind out of the drum for me as a player. And now it sounds good on the record, but yet again, I don't know if that's the actual drum or a sample was flown in and mixed in with it to get that sound that's on the record.
Totally understand what you're saying. Yeah.
So
I don't know. I'm glad. I'm sorry that I asked you who the artist was. That was a very lame question.
No. It's I don't want it, for typical reasons. I don't want anybody to feel that I'm bashing them, because I'm not. It was just a different experience for me, because I was used to, anytime I had recorded before, I lugged my drums in and they were tuned the way that I liked them, and we recorded. And they sounded good. This was this was my first experience as a session guy coming in and recording on a drum that just didn't feel the way I expected it to feel, or the way I was ultimately the most comfortable playing the drum. And, everybody, all these other drummers out there, these session drummers, are probably listening to me going, oh, dude, cry me a river. But, I'm not Vinny. I'm not, Steve Gadd. I'm not Josh, who have all played on millions of records, But when those guys play on records, when Josh plays on a record, those Gretsch drums show up. When Vinny plays on a record, his Gretsch drums show up. When Steve Gadd plays on a record, his Yamaha drums show up. So, they have the benefit of it being their gear, no matter who the artist is. So it was a little bit of a different, and it was a learning experience too, Yep,
I understand. It's like a little bit of a odd position to be in, and you have to choose what your battles are going to be.
Right. And I don't like being too confrontational. I was excited because I had the potential of being on a major record. And for me, I didn't have a lot of experiences like that going into that situation. So it was like, all right, this guy's producers, produced some records that I'm familiar with. And, he's here and he's getting paid a lot of money to do this, and my job is to get in here and do them to where they like what I did as fast as possible, and it went from, and I think it went well, because it went from, hey, can you come down and do 2 songs, to, hey, dude, you just finished those 2 songs, man, go listen to this one, we're going to do a 3rd one. And then at the end of that 3rd one, it was, hey man, do you mind spending the night and coming in tomorrow and doing 2 more? Well, yeah, sure. Great. So I think it was going well. It was just an odd experience just for that snare drum. But God bless you, Josh Freese, because the rest of the kit was amazing. And I mean, it's just exactly the kit I'm talking about, that vintage Gretsch kit of Josh's, and it is amazing kit.
Yep, I'm glad that you got to use that in a way. So. Anyway, what studio was it?
We were at Henson Studios in L.A. That's pretty much everything that I've ever recorded that's been put on CD or released or anything like that has always been done at Henson. And I mean, it's only a few things. I don't have a huge discography, but everything's been done at Hinson, and I absolutely love that place. There's a history and a heartbeat and a soul to that place that you just can't beat it.
Oh, that's cool. Very cool. Glad you have that.
I'm glad too. It's that way. At least those days where I'm not the cool grandpa. I'm like, hey, does their grandpa have this? Boom. So
yeah,
it's one of those things. It's definitely a cool thing, and I look back on it, and I have friends, a lot of friends that are better musicians all the way around than I am, better drummer than I am, that never got to experience something like that and don't have, their performances on a major record, did never get to ride on a tour bus and play in front of, 20,000 people a night, that type of thing. They didn't get that experience. So I'm very grateful for that experience and don't have a bad thing to say about it at all. It was like, hey, I'm very lucky to get to do this. So let's make the best of it. And, it wasn't sustainable, unfortunately, but it was, it was a good time. And, the adjustment back to normal life wasn't terribly difficult, but, it was just like, hey, I got to do what a lot of my friends wanted to do. I'm very fortunate, and, it was definitely a lot of fun. But, as far as like knowledge of drums and tuning and diving into that stuff, I just never paid attention to it, and now I'm diving into it a little bit more. And I know when you started back in the days, back then working with Billy and stuff like that, the technology for the heads and the drumsticks and the hardware and everything was nowhere near what it is today. I mean, we're all very fortunate to have what we have today with the options where Evans and Remo seem to have 35 different lines of drum heads to choose from. And there's, 1,000,001 different models of drumsticks and pedals and all of that. I mean, back then it was basically just, what was it, like the Ambassador coated heads, single ply heads, double ply?
Yeah. And the clear Ambassadors, and used a lot of clear Ambassadors as well, and a lot of Ambassador coated on the snare drums. Hardly ever used a two-ply head. Once in a while, hardly ever did black dots. Love the black dots. It's just there was less technology, therefore there was less choices, and maybe there's a lot of good that came from that. There was like I say, the main thing I keep reemphasizing. People wanted their own sound. They didn't want their drums to sound like the guy next door. They wanted their band to have their own sound. They wanted to have their own sound when it came to drums. And so it's for me, that's what I kept hearing. This guy is a great player. He wants to have his own sound. He doesn't want to have somebody dictate what it should be. He wants to learn what that is. What does he listen to? Who does he have as a reference? Who do I have as a reference? Most people were listening to jazz. There wasn't a lot of these incredible rock bands yet. And then when they happened in the 70s, man, it just was amazing how many great drummers, how many great bands, and they all had their sound, their own sound. I think that's how you learn. When you keep copying people, when you keep trying to do what somebody else is already doing, I mean, sure, when you become a drummer, you listen to other drummers and you cop some of their licks. That's how you come up with your own. But I'm talking about when the band wanted their own entity, their own sound, they first had to decide, well, what do we really like? And what do we have for a reference to know that there are different sounding bands? What are the qualities in that? What can we do? I want to hear this. I want to hear that. And that's a beautiful time to grow up and learn. Beautiful time to start your career. Because you got to get going, dude. You got to start getting with it. You got to learn how to hear what they're saying. And therefore you'll learn how to do things better, or just learn how to do them. So I'm grateful as well as to the period that I started and the genres. And yeah, very wonderful.
So you also mentioned that you were diving into the snare beds and using different ideas on those. And so what went into that? I mean, what for me, I've always gone under the philosophy, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So what goes into, why would you alter a snare bed on a particular snare drum? And I know that's a very open-ended question because there's so many different drums out there, but if you can kind of encapsulate it within,
but there wasn't that many drums out there. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It's a different era. You got way too many drums on the market now. Way too many. There's way too many of the same old. But back then, there wasn't any customizing of drums until Al Duffy at Professional Percussion and Fred Hanger, he developed the cable snares and the Dresden timpani and other things. Hanger was played with a New York Met, I think. I can't remember. But what I'm saying is there was not a lot of snare drums. And there wasn't a lot of different. I mean, let's figure it out. There was Ludwig, there was Slingerland for a while, short-lived in the rock era. There was Fibes, F-I-B-E-S. Excuse me. I mean, there wasn't Gretsch, Ludwig, all those. There wasn't a lot of choices. There was nobody making a bunch of different kinds of snare drums like there is now. So what I think I learned from Al Duffy was when to modify and when to leave things alone, like you were saying. Why would you want to touch that drum? It's like I already gave you that example of what we already knew. Gretsch drums on recordings and live sounded great. It wasn't just jazz guys that made them sound great, great players. They just were well made. And so I guess what I'm saying is that I think you have to develop a sense of, well, this could sound probably better. Well, what's the deal with it? Well, the beds aren't very deep, and for some drums that works out great. Some drums it doesn't. The edges are a little gnarly on this. Wonder if they should be changed. I think it's knowing what to do and when to do it. And I think there's an art to that. And I feel like I don't know if I mastered it, but I became very good at it. And I think that's what propelled me to make my own snare drums. And I started off with wood, and I wasn't happy with it. I didn't want to do wood snare drums. There's already wood snare drums. I want to do what I want to do. I always went to radical snare beds and radical edges. I thought it gave a little bit more oomph to the drum. And so I just, whatever it was, I was going to make it more radical. And yeah, maybe that'll work most of the time. Maybe it won't. Well, that's how you learn. Why do you have to be radical with everything? Well, why not? What's the problem? You don't like this drum? Okay, well, we'll get you another one then. We'll get you something else to play. Nobody should dictate, or I think it's really wrong when a guy says, yeah, I remember doing a Loggins thing. I was helping Jeff Jonas, who's a brilliant guy, like Harry McCarthy. Those guys are brilliant. And he had so many things going on. With Drum Paradise, he asked me if I'd help him with Loggins. And Chris is a friend of mine and just a wonderful drummer, just amazing. And so I remember them saying, yeah, this is the Ocean Ways snare drum. We use this on everything. Really? Well, what if the drummer doesn't want to use that? Well, the producers call the shots on that. And that's my first encounter where, wait a minute, a drummer comes in, you're going to tell him what snare drum to use? Well, he knows this room really well. Okay, all right. Why don't you let me hear the room? Why don't we hear the room? I mean, why don't we put up something really nice and let's hear the room? It doesn't work? Okay, well, I'm not going to stand in the way of a guy who knows what he's talking about because he's worked there a long time and with a lot of great players. That's not what my point was. My point was, you heard the room, you know the snare drums, but I haven't. I hadn't been to Ocean Way yet. I went there actually with what's her name? Myron Gumbacher played with her for a long time. What's her name?
Pat Benatar.
Pat Benatar. I went there and helped Jeff with that too. And I remember somebody saying, "Well, Myra, what are you going to use that snare drum for?" Why do you ask somebody a question like that? Have you heard the damn drum yet? Have you heard it in the music? So that was my first encounter where the somebody in charge would sometimes dictate what snare drum to use or what ride cymbal to use. And I found that very interesting. It's not that they were wrong all the time, but they weren't right all the time. And so that's where I developed my own skills. I just said, I'm not going to be a yes man. And if the drummer says to me, Jeff, I really don't like this, then I'm definitely going to change it. But he needs to learn language. I don't like that. Okay, could you tell me what it is you don't like? Oh, I don't really know. I just don't like it. Well, that's not going to work for me because I need to know what it is you want to hear. Or I can't give it to you. You have to get somebody else. I don't do sign language and I don't read people's minds. I know I could if I wanted to, but I'm not here to do that. I'm here to listen to what you are telling me. I think that's why I developed what I developed. I became very good at what I became good at because there weren't no mentors. You had to develop your sense of listening to a language, and some people didn't have it. So you had to weed through the words and say, okay, let me hear you. Okay, could you play that a little longer for me? And then maybe I'll hear what you're talking about. And sometimes I could, and sometimes I couldn't. I'm not inside his head. I'm not inside his ears. I don't know what that snare drum or that floor tom or that bass drum, I don't know what it is. We want tone. Almost all drummers, except for the ones that learn how to put tape all over their heads and have a dead sound. I didn't come up in that school. Never will be a part of that. But I think a lot of people want just to have good tone. Cindy says it all the time. I don't have any bunch of words for you. I just want good tone. Steve, tone. It's recognizing what is good tone. One man's good tone could be a train wreck for someone else. So I think I'm done pounding on that.
Right? Pun intended, pounding on it. It's funny that you mentioned that you didn't come up from the school of, well, it doesn't sound right, let's just throw a bunch of tape on it. Oh, for me, no muffling whatsoever. Obviously, kick drum heads now, they're built in with a little bit of muffling, which I understand to get a little more punch out of them. I would never second guess that.
Chaz, you just gave the greatest example of what I'm talking about. You develop skills to get that damn sound without muffling or doing this. See, here's the difference between the old days and now. We don't want to hear ring. Ring? What is he talking about? Oh, he's talking about the snare. Bing! You can hear that above everything else? Well, no, but there is a ring. And this is with no instrument. This is just the drums doing a line check. We're just going to do a line check to make sure all the microphones work. Now we're going to do a sound check. Can you play a beat for us? Sure. And then you get done playing the beat. Okay, now, Jeff, and we're not liking that snare drum. Why is that? Well, it's got too much ring. Wow. It's got too much ring in a room with no other instruments going on. And that was my downfall sometimes. I didn't have patience. And I would say, this doesn't make any sense to me. Can we hear the drum with the music? Well, that's not what we're doing now. So there again, there's a dictation going on. This is the way they do it. And you have a choice to let them play these games or in some cases do the things the way they want to do it. I guess most of them were successful, so they were allowed to do that. But also, I have developed skills. I know what I'm doing. So let me I'll give you a great example. I'm not going to name names, but it's a very important recent example. Here we are. We got the Santana original band back together. Michael Shreves on drums, one of my good friends and beautiful drummer. God, what he did at an early age, it's set the bar way up there.
Oh, I know it. I've seen that video a million times.
Yes. But we got together in Las Vegas to do a record called Four with all the guys, Neil Schoen, Craig Raleigh, and the engineer, and he's a very good engineer. I will make that statement. He is a really good engineer. He comes out into the room where I have the drums almost done being tuned. I did a pre-tuning, and I borrowed the drums from John Wackerman at DW. Okay, we didn't use the original Santana Ludwig drum kit. Michael had it, but he didn't want to do that. He's endorsed by DW. He wanted to play DW, and I said, well, I want to get some old DW. He said, okay, and I said, John Wackerman's going to loan them to me, and they were old DWs, and I loved them. And we set them up, and we had no hole in the bass drum reso head. And the guy, I really have to say that, aren't you going to cut a hole in the reso head? No. Have you heard the bass drum yet? Well, not really, but I already can tell. I said, oh, you already know the sound of this bass drum? Well, no, but I can tell, no hole. That means there's going to be a problem. Not for me, there isn't. Not for the drummer, there isn't. He wants me to do what he wants me to do. That's why I'm here. Oh, well, okay. In a little while, we'll do a line check, and then we'll do a sound check. You can play some grooves until Carlos gets there or Michael Shreves. Oh, okay. I have no problems going head-to-head with anybody. I have gotten to the point in my life where I have to be very proud of what I've accomplished. I am extremely lucky for the opportunity. And I sure as hell didn't sit on my ass when the opportunity arose. And I worked my ass off to get really good at what I did. So for me, I'm not going to listen to a guy tell me to change something when he hasn't even heard the damn drum. So I did what I do. I got this kit sounding amazing. And he came out and said, yeah, you're right. That bass drum sounds pretty good. We'll have to see what it sounds like with music. I said, yeah, I'm glad that you like the sound. He said, I'm actually pretty amazed. It sounds, I had the felt inside the bass drum. I had lots of air moving, man. And that's the secret. You got to hear the air moving. That's the secret of all those great recordings. You can hear that bass drum. You can hear the inside of it without a hole. You can hear it going from batter to reso because you're out in front of it. You can hear it. And I just loved that he came in and said, well, I have to admit that sounds really, really good. This isn't the first time that's happened. And I leave the room for a second, and Carlos has showed up. I didn't know that. And he sat down. He started playing the drums. And he stops, and he said, who tuned these drums? But the way he said it was a little edgy. So I went over to him. I said, I did. He says, they sound amazing. That's all I need.
Yeah,
I don't need any more.
You can't ask.
Michael Shreves will be here. Michael Shreves will be here in a minute. I already know what he's going to like.
Right.
He wants to hear tone. He wants to hear the drums speaking. That doesn't happen with all kinds of technical crap. It doesn't happen with all kinds of stuff on the board. Put some good mics on the thing. Get the drums to sound great where you place them in the room. And you notice I'm getting a little bit, more ferocious with this. That's the word I'm going to use. It's because I've had people say some really strange things. Like they're already assuming it's going to be Billy Bob Dickhead coming in with his dumbass drums and not having any knowledge of how they could sound better. And so they end up having to do the work, these engineers and these guys. Put some tape on there, I guess we'll have to use 14 mics on that snare drum. And, just give them something good to start off with. and you can't go anywhere but up from there. I've been to sessions where it's going down, dude. You're the engineer and you've never worked with a drum tech before. Nashville was a very good and rough experience for me. It was a good experience, ancient history of the way they do things down there. They did. They changed a lot, thanks to Harry McCarthy and a little bit because I was there. But they were set in their ways with everything. And so it's very, very annoying that a guy comes in and hasn't even heard what you're doing. How could he? He didn't play anything, didn't do anything. And I'm not the drummer. I'll play something for you and you get a gist of it. And of course, when Michael got there, he liked the sound of them. I mean, and if he didn't, he'd say, can you make this tom a little lower? Sure. Can you make this tom a little higher? Sure. It didn't compromise anything to do that because we already started at a good place.
Well, and that's one of the things that came to mind as well when somebody's saying, well, I already know you're going to have to cut a hole in that bass drum head. Well, A, you don't know that, or, we're going to have to put some tape on that snare drum, or the snare drum's ringing too much. My philosophy on that is, hey, let's get the drums speaking and sounding. Let's get the tone out of the drums and record them that way. And then you can always do your studio magic. If something doesn't quite sound right, you can always put a gate on that snare drum or take a little EQ a little bit of that ring out later, but you might as well record that drum. You might as well get everything out of it that you possibly can so that you're not losing, because once you take it away and record, you can't bring it back. But if you already have it there and you take a little bit away and it's still there, you can back off on what you've done with the EQing and the gates and that type of thing to bring the life back into the drum because it was committed to tape that way.
Yeah. I mean, I make beautiful drums and snare drums and a few bronze drum kits and a few steel ones. And when you're going to come in there and already tell me what the bass drum's going to do when I haven't even heard it yet, well, I take that real personally because I made those drums. Now, if it's a drum I've never worked on, never made, like let's say it's a DW or a Yamaha or Sonar kit, and I never made those drums. I had nothing to do with that. But I tell you what, I worked my butt off to get them to sound good, and it's not that hard. Not hard to make Yamaha sound good. Not hard to make Sonar sound good, unless you're just an imbecile and don't have any business being around the drums. They're going to already have beautiful structure and they'll be beautiful shells. So when for me, I had to start standing up for myself. I didn't learn all this to have you just debunk it right now. That's not going to happen with me. Go get somebody else. I'll leave right now, but I'm not leaving the drums till the drummer gets here. Now, if the drummer says things to me, I'll change it. But you're the engineer. Isn't your job just to listen to what we have for the drummer within the parameters of the music? Let's be open about this. And there was for a long time, Jazz. There was, like you said, well, you're going to have to, we're going to right now, or you might as well just get started on that bass drum. I already did the bass drum. What are you talking about? Well, I mean, I see you put felt in there. Oh, you saw that? Oh, okay. Yeah, but you need to cut a hole in there. Why? Well, we have found that most bass drums don't sound good unless they're dead. Oh, dead. Oh, no tone? Oh, that's not going to work with me. I didn't learn all this to get rid of the tone. So that's in the days when there were no drum guys. The drummer was frustrated. I saw the most ridiculous. I saw a cinder block inside a bass drum. I saw a piece of a railroad track go inside a bass drum where it was bowing the shell out around. I mean, I saw some ridiculous. Okay, I brought my pillow from the hotel. Are you going to sleep here? Is that what you brought that for? No, it's going to go inside the bass drum. Not on my watch. It's not. Now, am I the one calling the shots entirely? No, the artist and the producer. Well, the drummer finally got leverage and finally started being more assertive. Not all drummers were already there. I never heard Billy, Steve, Lenny. I never heard any of them say, "No, we're not doing that," or be told that. This is the drummer. This is the drum kit. He's the drum guy. These drums were going to sound good, or these guys wouldn't be here. So that took a lot for drummers to get to that position, like you said, because there was always already this preconceived notion that there were a couple things you did to the drum kit: cut all the bass drum or take the head off completely. I couldn't believe that one. Okay, take the drum head off, just put a basketball or a dead rodent in there or something.
Well,
And so
I've never understood like
you didn't laugh at that? Oh man, I thought that was funny.
Well, I was just thinking, I've never understood like the concert tom, the single-headed tom thing. They just always sounded so hollow to me, and
and not only did we not understand that, but they took 421s and shoved them up inside of them. What sound are you going to get from that? They called out, I learned a new word a few years ago. Oh, they call that point. They need to hear more point on that drum. What? Yeah, we need to hear the head only, with the stick hitting the head only. Oh, you don't want to hear the bottom of the drum? No, not really. So those concert toms were an answer to volume and not proper mic placement and tuning for a bottom head drum. Concert tom usually refers to a concert usually was done in a huge venue. You didn't go see, Led Zeppelin or Supertramp or Journey or the Rolling Stones in a tiny theater. What would be the point of that? There's about 20,000 people that are trying to get in a small theater. So concert, yeah, except for Gretsch. I guess Gretsch did that for a while. It was a fad, wasn't it? Where they wouldn't put lugs and a hoop and a head on the bottom of the toms. Concert tom. Really? Well, what concert was that gave you that idea? It's a dead sound, and because it's dead, then they shoved the mic up into the drum, and now you've got the stick hitting the head. So instead of a rich tone, you've got a dead sounding, which we got to admit that was done for a long time, that dead sound.
I mean, but was that done out of laziness? I mean, you're only tuning one head. So the drum, if you get that one head in tune, then the drum's going to be in tune. I mean, was that done out of laziness, or was it done, hey, we don't want to have to deal?
I can't speak for the manufacturing. I'll bet you $100 million that engineers in rock bands and other types of music said, man, just get rid of that bottom head so we can shove the mic up in it. And so you can bet Ludwig and Slinger, and I don't know about Slinger. You can bet those guys that came to see their drummer they endorsed said, oh, look at that. You took the bottom head off. Yeah, they want this sound. And, it's a lot of people here. Oh, they aren't using microphones tonight? Yeah. And so what does Bill Ludwig do, or the other Ludwig guys? They go back to the drawing board. Hey, listen, tomorrow, make a bunch of those toms, but don't put lugs and hoops and heads on the bottom of them. We're going to call them concert toms. A lot of those rockers, they don't know what they're doing. They'll buy it. So
amazing.
I have to say, a lot of the stuff that happened, in the old days like that, not with jazz musicians, not with fusion musicians, I think a lot of that happened because of engineers, and that was lazy. That was lazy. Put that bass drum, fill it up with everything. Oh, so you don't want any tone? No, that presents a challenge. I'll have to work with that. I don't have time to work with that bass drum. I just want a dead sound. There's no overtones. There's no this. There's no that. And yeah, there's no bass drum. You've got one inkling of that bass drum in its capabilities. So yes, you're right. There became a laziness in the industry. Hence, the manufacturer said, hey, look at that. They took the bottom heads off and they put a mic up inside the drum. I couldn't believe Nashville. They would put 421s up or on the bottom of the drum and 57s on the top, or vice versa. I guess they got a good sound. I didn't buy the records. There's a lot of stuff that was a pat thing. Everybody did the same thing. That's what I loved about England and LA and a few other places. They were open. They weren't patented. There's openness to what they heard, what they wanted to experience, how they wanted to attempt. I think every session should be approached differently. Well, why wouldn't it be? You have different musicians, different instruments, different music. Everything is different. If you're doing the same kind of session every day, why do you I guess you just get the Wrecking Crew and they'll do the same shit on every record. Well, that's not right. That's not right to say shit. Excuse me. They'll be doing the same approach. They'll be approaching every record or every single the same way. It's a pat thing. It seems to work. We have the formula.
Yeah, it blows my mind.
About that.
No. You're perfectly fine. So I do have to ask you here. You've done recording sessions with everybody. You mentioned earlier Denny Fongheiser, and you've mentioned that you've worked with everybody, right? And you've used.
I did a big tour with Denny Fongheiser, by the way. That was a wonderful tour.
When was that, and what tour was that?
It was a Belinda Carlisle tour. It was a long one, and it was when she had this huge record album. And he got a DW endorsement, and he played so great. And I made him small 12-inch snare drums and 24-inch bass drum, great toms. Oh, man, he's a phenomenal player. He's an Oakland guy from Oakland. He's a friend. He's a beautiful cat. And he's a great player. He can play anything. I think that's another good sign of a drummer. He can play anything.
Well, it's funny because my first experience with hearing Denny play was back in the 80s when he was playing with Heart. When they had the big, like 80s pop hits back in the day. And
Barracuda and all that.
Well, no. That was the original guy. I'm talking like, How Do I Get You Alone and These Dreams and that type, where they had switched producers, and the producer said, hey, let's get you into some stuff like this. And they had massive pop hits all over the radio. They weren't even a rock band at that point per se. There were no Heart rock songs on the radio. They were these, uber polished pop ballads, which were the thing back in the 80s. And he played on a lot of that stuff. And then my next experience with him, I lost track of him. And that must have been when he was doing the Belinda Carlisle thing. But I lost track of him until he did a record with Jimmy Page and David Coverdale. And he played his ass off on that record. And I was like, oh, this is the same guy? He's playing his ass off,
I did not know he did that record. I did a record with him. Did not know that.
Oh, man, it is a great record.
That first Tracy Chapman album, he did an amazing job on that.
See, now I'm going to have to go. That was my problem, was I hear a lot of these records, and I like some of the songs on these records. But back then, we didn't have the internet, so I couldn't, other than going and buying the record, which I was a kid, I couldn't afford to buy every record that had a song on it that I liked.
The radio too.
Well, sure, but the radio, they only focus on the artist. They never told you who played on the record.
Oh, of course not. You're
Just
right.
Now that we have the internet, if I'm having a Vinnie Colaiuta day, where I'm feeling extremely inspired by Vinnie Colaiuta, then I can go on the internet and go, oh, he played on all these amazing songs. I'm going to listen to that. And then as soon as you hear it, you're like, yep, that's Vinny, and sometimes you hear songs and you have no idea who played on them. And then once you find out, you listen to them again and it's a completely new experience. Like for the longest time, I had no idea that Steve Smith played on Heaven by Bryan Adams, and then when I found out, I went back and listened to it. And I'm like, oh my God, those are those same big tom fills that are all over, like, Faithfully and Open Arms and all the Journey ballads. Those are those big tom fills. And then it made all the sense in the world. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's exactly Steve Smith. That could be a Journey drum track down to a T. That's why they hired him, is so that song would have that feel, because Journey was so popular at that time.
Well, have you ever Steve Smith with Jean-Luc Ponty?
I have not. I have not.
You're missing some Major Treat stuff there. Enigmatic Ocean. I mean, he's got playing some beautiful things on there. Yeah. Steve is an amazing jazz drummer, fusion drummer. Rock, of course he is. Rock is amazing rock drummer. He's got all this other stuff that he can pull from because he's studied it, he's worked at it, and it's pretty cool. It's, yeah.
I mean,
very impressive.
I've followed him. Obviously, we've talked about this before, and you know how much of an influence Steve is on me playing wise. And so I've followed him pretty close. And again, there's probably a million things that he's played on that I've never heard. And that's my fault and nobody else's. But when I watch him play, especially in the last 15 years, I sit there and watch him play and he's so relaxed. And he's not even breaking a sweat. And it's almost, to me, it's almost like an attitude of, yeah, I know what I'm doing. So, don't say a word. Just watch, I know what I'm doing. So yeah. Just eat it up because I know what I'm doing. And he's such a relaxed player. He's not even breaking a sweat ever. And when you watch his videos and the DVDs and look at his books and stuff that he's put out, he's a very good clinician. Like he's very comfortable in breaking stuff down and helping people to understand exactly what's going on. And not every amazing drummer has that ability to do that. And from that, you can tell that he's very well read and puts the time in and the research in to have that foundation to pull from for what he's trying to convey to somebody else.
Right. Absolutely right. Yep.
So
one of the best.
Right. So I do have so as far as all of the studio stuff that you've done, and you have done tours and that thing, which did you prefer and why? Do you prefer studio or going out on tour? Ultimately, what is your favorite thing to do?
My favorite thing to do is be a part of a band and tour your butts off and immediately go to the studio when the tour is over with. And take all that energy and take all the stuff you've been writing and sound check ideas and all this stuff that came from the tours and go right into the studio. Some guys, they wanted to relax and they just didn't want to do anything when they came back from tours. Most of the artists I work with wanted to go right into the studio. It's time for another album. And I think every time good players and good bands go out, no matter what the genre is, when they go out, they are open, they're listening, and they're also doing stuff that they've done every night for a long time. I think that gives them the impetus to want to go in the studio because they're fresh. I think when you rest too long, you get kind of lackadaisical. This is just my outlook on the old days. So I think I love them both, but I think when you get to be a lot older, like for me, I don't know anybody that's as old as me in this work. I think when you get older and you've done this so long, I don't want to go out there and experience the touring anymore. Been there, done that. I want to just go into the studio. And as long as I can still be contributing, I would love to be hired for that. And if I can't contribute and I no longer have it, then I shouldn't be in there. I think I still have it. I don't think, I know I still have it, but it'll be different. I won't necessarily be working with the artists I've been working with. See, that was another nice thing. You got to work with these guys on tour, like the Doobies or Billy or just Mark Rennie with Jethro Tull or Tommy Bolin or just you got to work with them in a day-to-day thing on tour. And now you get to go with somebody you're very familiar with. You know how they play. You know how they figure stuff out. And so you're all going in there fresh when it comes to the studio. And you're familiar with each other. And you can laugh. I think if you don't have a sense of humor at the end of the day, with all I got to say, whenever we do end this, may not be today. But whenever we end this, I think you've got to have a good sense of yourself and be comfortable with yourself and have a great sense of humor, because you got to be able to laugh at yourself and just admit, well, you know what, I don't really get this. I'm going to have to work on this. And so to be familiar with the artist, that's really cool. I did that Imagine Dragons album, Imaginary Voyage.
Right. Imagine Dragons. Okay, Vegas band.
Imagine Dragons album with Mark Gray, who's one of my favorite engineers. Mark Gray is just stunning work, and I hope he gets to hear me say that to him again and again and again. But we did that Imagine Dragons album, and I don't know those guys. My daughter knew about it. Told me, "You're going to work with them? Oh yeah, they're cool. They're you'll dig them." Really? I never heard of them. And then I quickly realized, man, they've written some great tunes. This is a lot of fun. But I noticed that Mark Gray and I are so much older. Let's see, me. I don't think there's anybody in any room I go into that I'm not older than. And except when I was with Herbie Hancock or Wayne Shorter or those guys, I think they're older than me. I'm not sure. But anyway, I just have to say that when you're familiar with somebody and your sense of humors are recognized and you're able to have fun. This is supposed to be a fun thing. So with those guys, I think they had fun doing their first record at the Palms. I think that, and they're great players and great songs. But I know they had some preconceived things, which I found to be kind of funny, because aren't you a little young to have a preconceived idea? Well, I guess if they know what they want to sound like, that's great. That's fantastic. So for the longest time on those sessions, I was able to do what I thought was appropriate, and they liked it. But then there was a time when Mark Gray said, "You know what, Jeff, you're going to have to cut a hole in the bass drum." And I said, "Okay." I didn't get uptight and say, "Why? Why do you have to do that? Can't you get a good sound?" I already knew what sound he was getting. It was great. They wanted a different sound. Okay. So I didn't get upset or anything. I just rolled with it, and that was fine. And that comes from doing this so long and not challenging them. Why? What do you want to do that? I remember one time I was working with Don Perry, a live gig. Don Perry's a phenomenal drummer and a really good man and a great friend. And I remember he and I were setting up his drums. He got them all set up, and he's playing, and and the sound engineer comes in. "Yeah, I don't like where you put the 57." I said, "No, that's where I like it." And this is a long time ago when, I'm setting the mics up too, because I've got a lot of experience and I learned from some very good people. So, well, I'm going to change that. I don't like the angle on it. Okay, well, now it's flat on the snare drum. You like that angle? And Don says, could you just let Jeff do that? And it turned into a big argument, and I should have just shut up. Let the dumbass do what he's going to do, or the smartass. Maybe he's a smartass. I don't know. He doesn't necessarily have to be a dumbass. And so he puts the mic where he wants it, and then he leaves. He goes back out to the console. And Don says, "Jeff, I know you know what you're doing, but it doesn't matter on this kind of stuff. It really doesn't." I said, "All right." And I remember him saying that. He was very kind and gentle, and he just said, "You don't have to challenge these guys. Yeah, you do know more than they do, but it doesn't really matter. It really doesn't. It's just a little live gig, and we'll be fine." I said, "Thanks, Don. I should have known that. I should have realized that." So, but we laugh about it to this day. we would say things. I can call him up right now, and I could be talking to him, and then I'll say, "Hey, it was nice talking to you," or he'll say that because we used to say that to people all the time. Be a long conversation or short conversation. Nice talking to you. I'll write when I get work because we used to write letters back then.
Oh man, see, I've had experiences where I've set up the kit, then they come to put the mics in, and that snare drum mic, they lay it in there between the hi-hat and the snare drum, and it's in my way. And they say, is that gonna be in your way? Yeah, well, dude, we're gonna have to figure it out because that's the sweet spot. So they go back out front to do their thing, and I move them. When they're walking away from me, I put the mic back where it's comfortable to me, and they're 9 times out of 10, they were none the wiser. I'm like, I can't play with it right there. I'm going to keep smacking it, and you want me to smack that microphone, and that sound's going to come out of nowhere and be so abrupt and abrasive in your system. It's going to be insane. So back it away.
And plus, you knock the cap off the mic.
Right.
And now I have to go get another 57. And
right.
Yeah, I know. What are they out there with binoculars on to know that you changed it? No, not most of them. They're not going to. No. I got to the point where I think I earned trust with a lot of engineers. They, Jeff, move that 57 or move that mic where you think it should go. Okay, thank you. They set them up where they want them. They say, is this all right? I say, it's fine. It's in a great position. No problem. If it's not, then we work it out. But if they call me on the intercom from the desk and say, put that in a different place. Let's see if it works where you want to put it. I'm not liking the sound of that. It's not always tuning, It's not always me way I hit the drum. It could be the mic placement itself or the choice of mic. I don't know. I don't think it's not an exact science. I think every venue and every studio has little idiosyncrasies, and I think little tiny lessons. They're just, everybody finds their way. But when you butt up against somebody, when you're going to argue, well, I know more than you do. Yeah, well, I'll prove that you're wrong. You just waste a lot of energy, and you're never going to get to the chase. Never going to get to resolve. And you got to laugh. Okay, well, I think you're wrong, but okay, let's do it your way. I know you're older, have more gray hair than I do. That's funny. Which doesn't mean anything either, So go ahead.
No, I was going to say, out of all of the people that you've had the pleasure, or maybe it wasn't all pleasurable, but out of all the people that you've had the pleasure of working with in the studio or on tour, who would be one that you would really love to work with again that you haven't worked with in quite some time, that you'd really love to reconnect with and work with?
A bunch. Well, Mark Cranny's gone. I'd love to work with Denny again. I'd love to work with Lenny again. I'd love to work with Billy again, in the studio especially. I'd love to get his 8-inch drum finished and get that to him. And I'd like to work with Steve again. I love working with Steve. And I like working with Cindy. I just think of the order, Billy, Lenny. I wish Mark was still here. Steve. Denny. John Molo. I loved working with him. We haven't talked in a long, long time. Don't really have an answer for that. But I'm so blessed to have all these experiences. And that's a really good question, Chaz, because if you've had good experiences, why don't you want to have more? One guy says it a different way. He says, well, we made memories then. Let's make some new memories. And I think that's what my new life's going to be when I turn 75 in July 22nd. I think the new philosophy or new way to approach every day is let's make some new memories. You don't have to retire and sit there and, just disintegrate. You have the fire still. You want to go make some new memories. And wow, wouldn't that be great to be in the studio again with Steve, Lenny, Billy, Denny. Notice all those names except for Steve's have a Y at the end. Billy, Ziggy.
Right. You're absolutely right.
And John Molo. I would love to. I don't ever talk to John Molo anymore. We just parted communication ways years ago, but not something that consciously was done. It just happened that way. And we did with John Molo. I think the coolest thing was years ago, Elton John picked various artists to do his songs, and the record was called Two Rooms. I don't know if you've ever heard it. It's an Elton John picking artists to do his songs. We did Madman. Bruce Hornsby Band did Madman Across the Water, and we were in Chicago at a really good studio. Man, there's Gus Dungeon, the producer. Let me do whatever I wanted to do. No questioning on the height of the overhead. No questioning on what went in the bass drum, what didn't go in, where the mic should go. Oh, they're a little out here on the bass drum. Yes. And Jeff, that's fine. Overheads was my thing. It still is. Learned a lot about them. I learned how important they are in relationship to the room. And so we got to do this. Our version, or Bruce's version. Bruce had a virgin?
Oh, maybe at one point.
Yeah, I guess. That's going back into his history. I have no desire to do that. So anyway, we are doing Madman Across the Water with the guy that produced the original Gus Dungeon with Elton John. And it sounds amazing. So we did that in Chicago, and then we went back out on tour. I'll never forget this. This is quite a great experience, story to tell. So I'm on the stage, and I'm working, getting John's drums taken care of, and great drums. They weren't DW yet. This is Pearl, I think, before he switched. And I'm on the stage, like I said, and John Molo comes down to the stage because he's been on somebody's walkie-talkie and nobody was coming to me and saying, Molo's trying to get a hold of you. John was in the dressing room pretty far away from the stage, and Bruce was, I don't think, there yet or was there, and Gus Dungeon kept calling saying, what the hell's wrong with this tune? I'm not getting the bass drum the way we had it in the studio. And John says, Jeff, what do you think that is? I said, he hasn't got enough level on the overhead. And he put the level on. He says, man, that was it. Thank you. I was, first of all, very flattered to be asked. Gus Dungeon asked John Molo to ask me. Wow, that's deep. And then to give the correct answer. Sounds like you don't have enough level on the overhead. Those overheads were doing a lot in that room that day. And John was so proud. See, my drum tech can answer any question. Or something like that. It was a very flattering, wonderful experience.
Yeah, it's pretty heavy duty right there.
If he would have called back and said, that didn't do a damn thing. He doesn't know anything. I went from knowing something to not knowing anything. So I'm so glad that my brain immediately said, that's overheads. I know he's not got those up. Because a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't realize, and I don't even have names for these people. Just my experiences have told me that people really don't give enough credit to room mics. Excuse me. They don't give enough credit to room mics and overheads. Those toms, that bass drum, that snare, yeah, they may sound great, but let's see that's what I love about Mark Gray. He's got so many cool mics everywhere that aren't right on top of the damn drum. And yeah, just.
Well, I mean, as far as room mics go, there's the famous story, obviously, of When the Levee Breaks, where they recorded it in a stairwell, essentially, and and it's pretty much a lot of just the room mics, and that was a big part at least what I've read and that type of thing, that's a big part of how Bonham got his sound, other than the fact that he did tune the drums a certain way. But I mean, that right there, his sound is so influential and will always be influential to drummers and engineers and producers. I mean, forever. At the end of the day, it's going to be forever. That's just how it is. And a lot of that ended up being room mics. I mean, if you listen to In Through the Outdoor, the drums just sound so big and so open and so massive. And a lot of that is room mics. So, I mean, that's something to be said about that.
They're absolutely right. Room mics, overheads, and also the actual sound of the room that those mics are picking up. Okay. And then I love the fact that they coined this phrase for, oh, well, that's open tuning. No, it's not. Just tuning to get tone. And Bonham had a real good sense of that because he listened to a lot of big band drummers and other drummers that had this big sound. They weren't so dependent on certain things. He tuned them and played them great, especially in the studio, where they were doing what they do, and so they call that open tuning. Now it's called tone of the drums. How do you get that? Well, you tune them so they have a pitch that can be recognized in the room, recognizing the room mics, recognizing the overhead, and recognized by the drummer. He doesn't need headphones to hear what it sounds like before you start recording. I mean, I think the most important part of a session is spending very little time on the drums because you're prepared when you come in. And then going to the console and listening to the drummer do some grooves. Holy cow, man. If it's happening, it's happening. If there's something missing, it's either me, the mic, or the engineer. And that's all there is to it. And you better get it fixed now. Like that, what's that famous guy that did Stones, Zeppelin, engineer?
Eddie Kramer?
Yes, Eddie Kramer, man. His own video that he did. You ever seen that?
I haven't had the pleasure, no.
Oh, that's really cool when he says, man, if you're spending more than a half hour on drums, you're a doofus. You don't belong in the studio. And I love that because I could never figure out why am I hitting this drum over and over and over again. And please, I hope whoever listens, and maybe no engineers will be listening, but seriously, if you can't get this right within a few minutes, we're setting levels. Okay. Mark Gray is one of the best engineers in the modern world, and he's not spending hours on levels. What he is doing, though, is he's making sure all that great outboard gear he has is tuned up, ready to go. So play the drums or hit a couple of drums. Let's get this all tuned up, ready to go. The session's going to begin pretty soon. And you don't want the artist walking in saying, "Where's my drum kit?" Oh, he went out. Yeah, but was that considered finished? Or the engineer, I'm not ready for you yet. Well, wait a minute. The downbeat was 3 o'clock. I'm here. I'm ready to go. Why aren't you? You do not want to hear a bunch of excuses. They got the energy right now. Let's go. Let's get this going. That's what I got out of all these years is nobody wants to hear somebody going boom, boom, boom for an hour and a half or a half hour, 45 minutes. Really, what's this guy doing?
Yeah, it would have been.
Well, I'm setting levels. Levels.
Yeah, it would have been tough. The guy that worked with Def Leppard for all those years for like Pyromania and Hysteria, I forget. He's the producer. I forget his name off the top of my head, but he's great. He had them. I mean, those records like Hysteria and the one that came after it took so long because he was having them record the guitar parts, like the chords, one string at a time. Is one of the famous stories.
I did not know that.
And I mean, horrible. I've heard stories like that. I've heard stories where, they've had drummers go into the studio and record just the drums and then overdub the cymbals after the fact to get the nice separation. And it just blows my mind. I've heard stories where Like Michael Corleone from Lynyrd Skynyrd played in Damn Yankees with Ted Nugent and Jack Blades and Tommy Shaw. When they went in to do that Damn Yankees record, there's a song that has a pretty straightforward double bass groove. He had never played double bass before. So they recorded it. He recorded the on beats on the kick drum and then had to go back and overdub the off beats because he had never played double bass before. So, I mean, there's crazy stories like that all over the place. So
that is crazy stuff.
Yeah, this is pretty insane. But
what's the name of the guy that was married to Shania Twain that did her first great album and also did ACD?
That's who I'm talking about. And for the life of me, Mutt Lange, yes. Robert Mutt Lange, yes. He one guitar string at a time.
That is absolutely ridiculous. And if you're listening, Mutt, because I know you want to know what I'm saying. I know you know I have a lot to say. Come on, Mutt. Come on, admit it. That's bull crap, a poo-poo. Yeah.
Did you ever work with him?
I love what you did with Shania's first record, and Paul Lime played drums on there and had that big 24-inch bass drum, sounded amazing. AC/DC, I love the way those albums were produced. But Mutt, come on, one string at a time. What is that? You have way too much time on your hands.
Yeah.
What is the budget, by the way, Mutt? Must be some big budget money.
Oh, it was
all that time.
But you know what? It paid off because I think out of the 13 or 14 songs on that Hysteria record, I think 9 of them were hit singles. So they got. Oh,
no. We know that the results are obviously how he got there makes no sense to me. But yes, obviously it worked because look at the big hits he had. I'm just saying. I just find that over the top. That's over the top. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that would have been a bit maddening. I probably would have. At that point, when that came out, I had hair. I probably would have pulled it all out to go through that.
I would have shaved right there on the session. I shouldn't be making comments about that because I'm not a producer. However, I will say this. After all these years, I am able to say, check out the da-da-da-da-da. You might not want it like that. Oh, okay, Jeff. Instead of, you're not a producer, just go back in your drum tech world. Where is that? Outside in a cage? So I would just say, you might want to check out this particular thing. So I admire good producers. It is hard work. And they have to be really knowledgeable of a lot of stuff. I mean, some of the best producers are very knowledgeable. And that's all I have to say about that. Who's your favorite producer? It's sure, George Martin did a great job. But I think Ken Scott on the Supertramp Crime of the Century album, brilliant. Brilliant. David Bowie, Beatles White Album, yeah, Ken Scott, man. Excuse me.
Well, there's
Martin with Beatles White Album.
There, you brought up Crime of the Century, and like those Supertramp.
Missing Persons, by the way, Missing Persons.
Oh, right. Those Supertramp albums, for instance, those albums today sound better sonically than 90% of the stuff that is new and comes out now.
Absolutely. You know why? Because they're good musicians with good ears, wrote great tunes, and they had Ken Scott, recording them. Man, I got a producer stuck in my throat or something. I don't know what happened.
It's just there's
get my humor. I don't know. Chaz is not allowed to laugh at any of my dumb jokes. We made that agreement before we started. Now,
yeah.
Chaz, when I make dumb jokes, don't laugh at them.
Oh, no. I just let them go off into the ether. Is it perfectly fine? No, but
see those ether trails up there? Those
right.
Trails? That's
yeah.
What jokes are.
They're poisoning us with those ether trails. But I mean, all of those, any good sounding record from the 60s and 70s, like Dark Side of the Moon, sounds better than 90% of the stuff today because every single instrument has a spot in the mix. Nothing is competing with anything else. And even the drums,
Absolutely. Well said.
You know, the drums back then, they weren't the greatest drums, you know that. But every single instrument, even like the Supertramp, every single instrument has its place in the mix, and it sounds amazing. That's why those Steely Dan records like Asia, and they sound so damn good, because everything is absolutely meticulous and spot on. I mean, amazing. I would think that those records were so damn hard to mix to get. I mean, they were either super easy, like, oh man, this is just, we throw up a quick mix and it's done, or they were so damn hard. Whereas today it's got to be a nightmare to get a good mix, because everything is competing with everything else.
Right. I think you brought up the most important point of this. Pint? You brought up a pint? I think you brought up the most important part of this part of the conversation, and that is Steve Gadd on drums, most of that stuff. It's about who played on them. It's about their technique. It's about the engineer's technique and the producer Katz. Come on, man. When Jeff Porcaro died and we went to his funeral up there at the, what do you call it, mortuary, or the grave, what's that place?
What, Forest Lawn? Is that where he's?
Forest Lawn in Glendale. When we were up there, they were reading letters from Katz and people like that. And they were talking about how Jeff, the two guys from Steely Dan, went back to New York. They just could not finish the record Gaucho. They just couldn't get it done. And so Jeff stayed with Katz and the engineer for hours, and they finished that Gaucho album. You ever heard Gaucho by Steely Dan?
I've heard the majority of it. I've never sat down front to back and listened to it.
Well, thanks to Jeff, he got that thing happening. He put the time into it. And I think that's the difference. The caliber and the experience of Gadd, Porcaro, Steve, Lenny, Billy, Mark Cranny, Denny. These are guys with lots of experience in different environments in the world and different issues in the world. They're not technos. And I'm not putting down technos, but I'm saying they don't have the same kinds of experiences. And so I don't live in the past, but I sure am grateful and blessed to be a part of it. And I think that's what those guys brought to the table. These records you're mentioning are timeless. You pull out any Steely Dan album, it's timeless. You pull out any Pink Floyd album, it's timeless, especially Dark Side. You can put money and all that stuff on the radio now, if there was radio like there was in the old days, and there'd be another hit again. The young people, wow, man, that's really cool. I wonder how they got that sound with the cash register. It was a real cash register bongo head with a microphone.
Right.
So, money, right. I wonder what that means. So I just very grateful and will never, ever forget whether it's great working with Greg Allman and Cher doing Allman and Woman, with guys from different bands, Klaus Vorman on bass, the guy that produced all the Allman Brother albums. He did a lot of it in L.A., and man, that sounded so good. And their experiences, how they recorded. I don't know, it's funny when we're talking about this, because I've forgotten half the albums I've worked on. Heck, I've forgotten more than most people. Oh, no, I shouldn't say that. That's too egotistical.
Yeah, but it's okay, man. You know, it's all we ask for is honesty on here. And I mean, you have a track record. You have a discography behind your name that people cannot take away from you. And I mean, you've been in the business from the early inception. I mean, again, circling back to the very beginning of this podcast, you blazed the trail. I mean, you were picking up knowledge from Al Duffy and those guys back in New York, and you applied a lot of stuff that guys are still using today. And so you're way more qualified and entitled to voice your opinion. Nobody's ever going to be able to take that away from you, Jeff. So
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Absolutely. So
thank you very much.
Sure. I mean, dude, that's heartfelt. That's the truth, and unfortunately in this day and age, there's not a whole lot of that floating around. It's very skewed. People get on Facebook and they have an opinion and because it's on the internet, it must be true. People come up with stories and I know for sure. Well, you weren't there. So you don't know for sure, and you came out with your video and you dropped some knowledge there and that was a great video. I recommend it. It's called Trust Your Ears. I recommend that to anybody. There are bits and pieces on YouTube, and I'm sure if you go on. Okay.
By the way, sorry to interrupt you, but I want to give credit to Tim Shahady, who's with Pisces Symbols, for coming up with that title. I sat there dumbfounded in New York after we did the stuff in LA, and I said, I have no idea what to call this. And well, you mentioned trusting your ears. Why not call it that? Tim Shahady. He's with Pisces. He's a great guy, wonderful guy, and he came up with the title. Want to make sure he gets credit for that. Not that anybody's buying that anymore, but did pretty well, that DVD. I'm very glad to say. And
well, if all the drummers that I've talked to, I mean, my circle of drummers, I mean, if you're not a John Bonham fan, then you're wrong. That's kind of how we look at it. If you don't like Led Zeppelin, you're wrong. That's the statement that we all float around. And everybody knows that video. If you're a drummer, you should check out that video. Whether you're a Zeppelin fan or a Tool fan or whatever, it's just a cool video because you do go through a lot of cool information on there. And one thing I did notice is as you were tuning the drums, you weren't hitting them with a stick. You were tapping them with a mallet, which for me, in my experience, tends to bring out more of the tone of the head,
right.
And that's something for everybody to keep in mind because I don't see a lot of people, somebody's up there, they're tuning the drum, they're hitting it with a stick. And I'm just shaking my head going, you're not really getting the tonality out of that thing. A drum, is not sounding like a drum, if you're hitting it with a stick. Which kind of sounds counterproductive, but when you're tuning it, you want to get, I don't know what I'm trying to say, hell.
No, you're right, especially the bottom head. That's what Steve does. Man, he's got that mallet. Well, he used to. I think but the emphasis is on that bottom head, and man, he's got the bottom of the drum sounding so good. And I have been able to do that on a lot of occasions as well. And the bass drum, I mean, I really am proud of myself for the Rezo side sounding great. That's the first thing I do on a bass drum. It's not the batter side. I do the Rezo side with the fells, and I just get it sounding good. And I think you're right though. There's a excuse me. There's a lot of tricks people have. Harry McCarthy is one of my favorite drum techs and persons, and he's just. I think what I liked about him was he said, "Well, you kind of started all this whole thing, but we were able to." Be in an era, all these guys I know have been very, very lucky and blessed, and have earned the right to work with some of these brilliant players, like a Steve Gadd. I've met him once, I think. I've never worked with him. Would it be great to work with him? I don't think he needs a drum tech. The guy's, he got his stuff happening, except for maybe setting up. I don't think he wants to do that when he gets to the gig, but with James Taylor and with what's his name, Paul Simon, with Steely Dan, all the stuff he's done is just brilliant. Would I like to work with him? Yes. But anyway, yes, the mallet. I appreciate you bringing that up. I really do. I've never had anybody talk about that kind of stuff, man. Whoa! I had a guy call me up one time, and I guess I'm allowed to say this. He called me up. He said, "Yeah, I bought your video. And so can you tell me how to tune the drums?"
Oh boy.
You paid $19.95 to buy my video, and you didn't learn anything from it. Then I had other guys saying, I want to buy your video, but can you give me over the phone some ideas? No, I'd prefer you to go buy the video. It's only $19.95.
The funny thing is, you, with the amount of knowledge that's floating around in your head, that you have access to at any given moment, you could probably put out a series of videos and, probably wouldn't even be able to scratch the surface on the amount of knowledge about drums and, walking into situations where something wasn't right and being able to fix it just because you have experience and that type of drum, this type of wood's kind of prone to doing this, so we counteract that by doing this, or we, loosen up one lug, or we start with the bottom head and get that happening, and then flip it over, and then the top head, and going on down the line. You have that experience. You can walk in there and fix that stuff, so you could probably do a series of videos on something like that. I don't know if that's something that interests you or something that would.
Sounds like a great idea. I love that.
Well, I'm the idea man. I'm not
on that next week.
Well, there you go.
Well, now I just got to find somebody that wants to do it. Pay for it. Let's see.
Right.
We could do a what do they call that when they reach out to people, they get their feedback? Do you think Jeff Ocheltree should do some? I can't even say my name. Should we get Jeff Ocheltree to do a series of videos on some of his experiences that he has? Well, I don't know. Still alive?
Yeah, it probably do like you'd have to go to DW and talk to those guys. Maybe do like a drum channel thing, like a subscription side on their site. That type of thing.
That drum channel thing is very cool.
Yeah, I've checked it out once or twice. I know Steve was on there a couple times, and I know
the drummers have been on it.
Yeah.
I think it's a brilliant idea. That was Don Lombardi's thing, and somebody else, Don Lombardi, and just brilliant idea. Really cool. They're doing that.
Right.
So.
All right, Jeff. So we've been at this for 2 hours. So
holy crapophobia.
Right. And so to wrap things up, I know that you're getting ready to relocate back to California and start that chapter and, get everything squared away. So, what are your plans once you get to California? I know you plan on hanging out with your kids and grandkids and doing that thing. I
don't have any grandkids. What do you think? My daughter's 24 years old.
Oh, you don't have any my bad. And I have grandkids. I have 4. So how'd that work out?
Well, you've been busy then.
Right. So, did you get to California?
My kids are very young. My son, Miles, he's 30-something, and he's 31, 32.
See, sounds like you were the busy one.
Well, I don't know. 3 children, I don't think that's a lot. I think 6 kids or 5 is a lot. 4 to 3? Nah. Anyway, my kids are very young and they have a lot of life to live before starting to become parents. I think they should be more prepared, and they say that themselves. They got a lot of things to do. Once you get 22 and 24, you shouldn't be having babies. Sorry, that's my opinion. So anyway, I just think back in California, what I'm going to work at is my friend Kurt Waltrip. What a wonderful guy. He has amazing drums, and he's got this new company he's put together, a new shop with all kinds of abilities and machines to make stave construction and all kinds of drums, and that's what he's going to do. And he's going to add a line to that, and it's going to be the bronze drum, my bronze drum. We don't know what the name of it's going to be or what kind of lugs it's going to have on it any of that, but he's willing to pay to have the Foundry cast some 6.5s, and we're going to start off with that. And I think that's what a great opportunity. So I'll be maybe either going to Colorado where his beautiful big shop is, or do some of it where I live. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to really think about that because I don't want to. I want to make myself available for some projects, and I don't mind flying to get to them. My like I told you before, Mark Gray, a great engineer, moved back to Jersey, and he does stuff up in Woodstock, etc. I think he's going to be working with Benny pretty soon in L.A. Not sure if I heard that right, but anyway, I guess what I'm saying is I'm going to make myself available to do studio work. I hope I get some. I'm going to make some drums, but I know that the drum world manufacturing, it's really difficult to make a lot of money making drums. I don't care who says differently. You got to have, it's a whole different ball game to make a living off it and to put the time into it. So I'm realistic in thinking that it would be great to be able to make drums again. I love doing that. I just love it. And I think my kids and I are going to be doing some projects together, some artistic projects together. We've been talking about it for the last few years, and we're going to do it. My kids are very creative, and I'm, again, blessed for that. They're just very, very creative and have great ideas and great energy. And so, anyway, that's a good question, and I don't really have the exact answer. I mean, not exact, but I don't have. Retirement is it's new, going to be new now because I retired because I got cancer, and now I'm retired because I don't want to go back on the road, can't go back on the road, and have to figure out another way to live to earn a living. And so that's a very good question. Some people say, "Oh, you're going to reinvent yourself." Know about that. Maybe.
Well, I think
I just want to do that.
I think now you are retiring because you want to. You're retiring now for the right reasons. You know, you're not forced into retirement. Now retirement is going to take on a whole new meaning for you because it's actually for you. And the fact that you're going to be hanging out with your kids, and I mean, again, it's still wide open. You can do whatever the hell you want to do. And I know, you know, it was a big deal for you, for your kids to hear the first episode we did, and they enjoyed it. So I have a message I want to send out to your kids here real quick. And that is that I absolutely love your dad. Your dad is one of the nicest, funniest, honoriest guys I've ever met. He's one of those guys that you want to go have a beer with and just rag on every single person in the rest of the bar. Just like, look at that guy. That's your dad has such a wealth and magnitude of knowledge, and every single person, every single drummer, every single up and coming drummer, and you don't have to be a drummer. You can be a musician and get something out of your information, Jeff. You don't have to be a drummer to learn something from what you've mentioned in these last 2 episodes. And I mean, I know we're going to do part 3 at some point because you and I get together and talk, and it becomes a big bullshit session, and it's awesome. So, we're going to wrap this up because we've been at this for 2 hours and 10 minutes, and, you know, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but again, dude, I love you. I cherish our friendship. And I appreciate the fact that you were interested in coming on here and doing this with me. It's a new thing for me. I'm trying to get it up and running. And dude, I can't say any more than I cherish this friendship I have with you.
Well, Jazz, that means a lot to me. Wonderful words, and I deeply appreciate it. And yes, friendship comes first, and then the idea of collaborating, doing this is very nice. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And thanks for sharing some of your stuff, too.
It comes natural with you. Like I said, you know, this is just a phone call that I always have with you. So good times.
When you start babbling, it's bound to catch on. Hey, that guy's babbling just like you are. Yeah, we babble.
Yeah, maybe I should change the name of the podcast to the Babbling Podcast.
Yeah, this is one of the second parts of the Babbling podcast.
Right.
We'd like to express our thanks to people who like listening to babble.
Right, because we've done quite a bit. So
there's a difference, if I may say one more babbling thing.
Sure.
There's a difference between people who babble from great experience, depth in their experience. There's a difference between them talking. Some people might want to call it babble. Well, you got to have a lot of experience to tell stories and be able to express what the experience meant to you. Because there's a lot of people that they don't get to have experiences and then be able to tell stories. Like I said, we were down in Santa Cruz with my good friend Gloria Simpson, and she's got amazing stories. And my kids and I are sitting there and we're listening to her tell some of her stories. And then that catches on. It's like a trigger for all people sitting around.
Right.
And then that's a good thing. It's a positive thing. It's communication. It's conversation. Get the phone out of your face. Get the laptop. Put it in the toilet. I don't care. Let's have a conversation. Let's trigger each other's experiences and make new memories is my new thing. I think that's the answer to your question. What are you going to do? I'll reinvent myself. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm just going to make some new memories with my kids, my friends. And I answered that question. That was a very good one. Who would you like to work with again? Or, that was a great question. It's really got me thinking because time goes so quickly. You don't realize it till certain things happen, either losing someone or your life changes on a dime. Guess what? You're not doing that right now. You need to go home. Oh, well, okay. So I guess I don't think there's preparation, but I think there is a flexibility in not being rigid. And so when stuff happens to you, bad, good, indifferent, you just really have to know how to tell yourself, look, I can deal with this. I don't like this, or, oh, I like this. This is fun. I know how I can deal with this. So that's all I got. I'll run out of gas.
Okay, Jeff.
I'll run out.
Well, I'll tell you what, man. I'm going to let you get back to your day. Again, I can't thank you enough for coming on and doing this with me and, helping me to get this thing started. I appreciate it. And you've been my first and second guest at this point, and you set the bar. So now it's really going to be on me to go out and get some guests of equal caliber. So I really appreciate you coming on. I will.
It's a beautiful thing to say. Thank you, Chaz. That's really nice.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you'll have no problem.
Well, I appreciate that, Jeff. Thank you very much. I will reach out to you here soon. I know you're planning on making your trip and you're moving sometime soon, I believe is what you said. So
I'm not really sure. They have to, excuse me. We're going to get through my 75th birthday first before anything. We don't know exactly for sure where that's going to be, but going to get through that. But, they got to make the final thing happen to get this particular piece of property. Then they can start getting the permits and all that stuff and build these two houses in Nevada City, which is a beautiful, cool area that supports the arts and has a lot of history. And so I'm looking forward to living there. But when they're going to break ground and start building for the slabs, whatever, I have no idea. We're hoping in June, end of June, July, August, September, get it going. Yeah, for sure. We're hoping that.
Okay. Well, good luck with that. I'll reach out to you here soon. You know me, I always just drop a little text message or a phone call to check on you, see how you're doing. And
this is very cool. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I will reach out to you soon. Again, Jeff, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today on this, and I'll be in touch. You have a great day, Jeff.
Thanks, Chaz. You too, man. And thank you again. It's very fun to do. I really, really love it. Thank you.
Anytime, Jeff. I'll talk to you soon. Oh, man, what can I say? I absolutely love talking to Jeff. So that's going to wrap up episode 2 of the Ear Mob podcast. We had Jeff Ocheltree for the first 2 episodes. Jeff's fantastic. You guys take care. Thank you for listening, and let me know what you think.